Alrighty.
Right.
This is a bit more comfortable.
It is. It is
Noisy
really.
kids.
Well, wait and see. But yeah, no.
You're expecting some?
Well, you never know. Some next door, things like that. You're in the burbs.
Mm. Oh, that's really nice.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Now, do you want me to call you Sue or Alex?
Oh, look, my name is Sue. Yeah, Sue. I know, it's a blurry, it was a tricky decision at the outset whether to go with a pseudonym or not.
Yeah.
Partly because it was set in a school, I thought perhaps I should.
There's a lot of teachers that feel that way.
Yeah. On the other hand, I don't think I've written anything I should be particularly ashamed of as such, and there's nothing. Yeah, I don't think it's too incriminating.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm here with Sue Doumney, who's also known as Alex Nader, and we're going to be talking about her books and about the choice of using a pen name as well.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because I think that using a pen name separates the genres for me.
Yep.
So some people will use a pen name if they want to write romance, but then also if they want to write sci-fi separately. Or crime.
Oh yeah, well J.K. Rowling, but
yeah,
not that. Yeah. Yes, that's another megasphere.
Yes. Yeah, but a lot of authors also, like we've got a couple who are going to be at the Writers' Festival that have just used a separate last name. They've used their maiden name, or they've used their mother's maiden name
just to differentiate.
Exactly.
The fields. Yeah.
Some people will use it as a way of giving themselves like a persona.
Yep.
So they can put on a show for people while they're, while they've got that name on, and then they take it off and they can then go back into themselves at the end, which is really fascinating.
I chose an old family name from way back when the very first relatives came to Australia from Lebanon on my father's side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were called Nader, and it was a practice at the turn of the century. We're talking about the previous turn of the century. To sort of say, well, what's your name? Oh, that's a bit hard to pronounce, Nader. Or where do you come from? And it was the village of Doumney, so they ended up being Doumney.
Oh.
Hence the name Doumney. So,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's actually got a story to it. But the Nader was the original family name. And I have a brother, Alex, who was a little bit nose out of joint because I'd stolen his name. But a really nice fellow at work sort of said, I think crime writers should have nice names. So it was either Alice Nader or Alex Nader. And I kind of felt that Alex was a little gender neutral.
Yeah, I think so too.
So that was the choice there.
Beautiful. Oh, that's so fascinating.
It
is.
Really.
You thought deep about that one.
A little
It wasn't
bit,
just,
anyway.
That sounds like a cool crime name. So tell me a bit about your book. And you have this box of cards here.
So because it's an audio book, I should have pulled it out. I've got it on a USB, the original recording.
Oh, wow.
And one of the ways I thought that I could actually get some sort of physical presence to perhaps put in bookshops or whatever was the postcards. So my son did design the cover as well, to be fair. He came up with the cover, and then we sort of put it into this postcard format just so people could sort of have a little look and take a little bit in. So it's set in Logan. I taught in Logan for 23 years.
What school? Or did you go between a lot?
No, I was in the heart of Logan at Maple Park, which is, I think, a really interesting school. I think it's got a diverse, certainly a multicultural, diverse population, which I always really enjoyed. Teachers had a really interesting role. I think these days, there's very strong, from what I hear at the moment, a strong administration that's very supportive, and I think their physical resources have really improved.
Definitely.
So that's great. And I know still some teachers who I knew, really dedicated teachers who continue to inspire kids and support them. And
the Maple Park State High recently hosted the Chamber of Commerce breakfast.
Awesome.
So they did all the hospitality, they did all the organisation.
I know they have a very strong sort of voc ed unit these days. I think there's for nursing students, there's hospital setup, a lot of hospitality, a lot of man arts.
Definitely.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's really good. Really good.
I like that trend. A lot of the Logan schools, a lot of the Logan high schools are moving towards that, giving kids practical skills and
Yeah.
on-the-job experience.
Yeah.
And it's so much more valuable than learning algebra.
Well, depending on what you want to do down the track
Yes.
as well.
Yeah,
But, I used to
definitely.
always argue that if you did have academic aspirations at Mabel, teachers would support you.
Yes.
And they did, I think teachers really stepped up to support those kids with those aspirations as well. And I guess on a realistic note, there were kids in challenging situations.
Yes.
Absolutely. And there were kids, I don't know, I can still sort of even now remember the first sort of girl I sort of taught many, many years ago who obviously had been through some trauma, and it was a real eye-opener for me at the time as a sort of middle-class uni graduate, sort of to just meet kids like that and just, I think I get kind of annoyed with the concept that schools aren't the real world. You know that classic line of, you'll find out when you get out into the real world. Actually, schools are microcosms of the real world.
Yeah, they're training
They
grounds.
totally are the real world. They're full of real world problems, and yeah, it was a real eye opener when I first started teaching to see the disadvantage that some kids had to sort of rise above to succeed, or to just survive.
That's one of the reasons why we're doing the Logan Writers Festival, and why I'm pushing for the schools to all attend, regardless of financial disabilities. Disadvantages.
Yeah.
It's so important that kids know that writing can be a refuge for them. That without a dime to their name, they can utilize the library services, and that they can still conduct themselves and build themselves up from nothing.
I find it interesting in a digital world the way libraries have adjusted, and I think thriving.
Yes.
Even though we weren't able to do an interview in one today.
It turns out you're not allowed to film in public spaces in public libraries.
You
So,
never know. You never know.
Whereas
Some
Sue's
places
lovely green backyard.
So yes, we went for this option, but I think libraries have done really well to actually meet the needs of readers, young and old.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's great.
Oh, have you seen the app BorrowBox? There's an app called BorrowBox.
Oh,
where
okay.
all Australian libraries have their database of books
Right.
as ebooks, and a lot of them as audiobooks
Wow.
right on there. So you can borrow these books for free
Right.
digitally.
Excellent.
And then you able to read them, and then just automatically delete after a certain time period.
I think I need to put my book out there in the library system a little bit more, perhaps.
Definitely. I'm sure they would love to have you in for interviews and book signings.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's. I wouldn't describe it quite as a hobby, but it's something I certainly want to pursue it. But it is hard as a full-time teacher. It's a full-time English teacher. It's a pretty heavy load.
Yeah.
But as I said, I've actually got aspirations to start on another book
That's
in the near
exciting.
future, and I'll probably actually take my protagonist to Brisbane this time and sort of use the Brisbane landscape and cityscape in the text.
Tell me a bit about Who Killed Chloe.
Okay, so Who Killed Chloe? Well, I don't think it's a big spoiler to say in the prologue, a 15-year-old girl's body turns up in the boys' toilets at a fictitious Logan High School.
Ooh.
Yeah, the janitor, or one of the cleaners actually, finds the body.
Yeah.
And the case is then passed on to Shane Christie. A little bit of Agatha Christie inspiration there.
Love it. That's my brother's name, Shane, so.
A student I taught in grade 9 with Shane. So I just thought, and she's a woman, so she's a young woman, relatively young, single mother, and she has a daughter herself just on the cusp of sort of adolescence. And I wanted to include sort of the challenges of the digital world. I think modern kids, there's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it's a very complex set of circumstances they have to navigate in terms of social media, in terms of access to everything online. I mean, you can have parental controls, etc. But I think, obviously you've got that poor little Dolly. The Dolly, there's the Dolly, the girl who suicided after a relentless online campaign.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, bullying's part of life. I'd love to say we'll stop bullying one of these days, but it'll never stop.
I think teenagers in particular, the
It's
lack
a pecking order.
the lack of empathy and the finding out who they are in that pecking order.
Yeah.
There's ways to navigate it better, and that's how to.
And
get
schools
kids.
certainly try to support that. There's no question about that.
I think Australian schools do much better than other countries.
Possibly so.
Yeah.
But that, because of technology, that bullying can follow kids right into their bedroom.
Yeah.
And it can be hard for kids to actually deal with that themselves, even though they might have support networks of sorts. And the other aspect of the internet, I guess, is just that it generates a demand for material, exploitative material, which obviously can embroil children and involve children. And so I wanted to touch on some of those themes.
Yeah.
So, and I also wanted to touch on, so I suppose there's a little bit of a subplot, I guess, with the female detective and her own daughter, and I wanted to create real characters. That was my aim, was to create relatable characters, three-dimensional characters.
Excellent.
That was my goal. So, so I wanted to create a detective who's not immune to the tragedy in front of her.
I find that so often when I worked on cruise ships, and I had a guitarist mate who would always hand me a new book because he had time to read, and he'd be like, read this book, read this book. Every single detective novel he gave me, I remember the basic plot line of them, but
procedural crime novels.
But none of them had characters that were memorable.
That's right.
And I find that there's only a few detective, mystery, and amateur sleuth novels where the character has a personality that it latches onto you.
Well, I wanted her to be dealing with her own issues in a sort of parallel way as she investigated just what had happened to Chloe.
I feel like a lot of mums with teenage daughters would be able to relate to that very well.
I hope so. Well, that's certainly what I think the female characters, I wanted them to be vulnerable but strong at the same time. I wanted to capture their grief but also their resilience, and I'd like to think I achieved that. I did. So there's Chloe's mother. Chloe has a boyfriend, Jake, along the way, who's from a sort of Italian family, and mum. Oh, sorry, that's a terrible thing. Antonia, she was Greek actually. So that's terrible. They're living at Chatswood, and so she's also a widow, his mother. So she has it, and she's from a different culture, so she has a different perspective again. And then there's there's a Logan counsellor who features in the text as well, whose wife is a somewhat downtrodden character.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so they're my three key women, I suppose.
That's a very broad scope.
And as I started writing, they filled out. It is interesting. I know people make those cliches that, the story took on a life of its own and the characters took on a life of its own. But cliches are cliches for a reason.
The reason that they're common is because they're true.
Exactly.
A lot of the time.
Yeah, as I was writing it, they fleshed out more and more. And I had moments, I did do that satisfaction a writer has when they sort of have okay, that's going to happen.
Yep.
And crime is, well, I wouldn't say particularly challenging, but crime, you certainly have to get a jigsaw puzzle going, and you have to make sure it's not too easy to put together.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the trick. You see all the pictures, all the pieces, because you're looking over it all, and there might just be foggy edges. But the reader can't know that you see all the pictures. It has to be.
Yeah, and it's interesting because along the way I thought, this is just looking. I think I need to complicate further. That classic line of plot complication. So Yeah, it was a really interesting and satisfying exercise ultimately.
Excellent. And it's as an audio book.
Yeah.
Do you have print copies or digital copies, or is it
Okay,
just audio
so
book?
at this point it is audiobook. I had the manuscript all done, and I have to I teach in Rochdale, and there's some students whose mother, or a couple of students and their mum records audiobooks. And that's Simone Father Clark, who actually, Simone Father actually, I should probably call her Simone Father.
Yes, yep.
And
She has donated a prize to the Writers' Festival.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah, she'll be helping someone with a podcast.
Oh, awesome. That's lovely. And she's great. She's really professional. She has a little studio set up in her home, and one of her daughters sort of said, why don't you have a chat to our mum, to chat to mum?
So
And after a while I thought, you know what, I'm going to invest in myself and back myself, and we'll see how it all pans out. So obviously it's still very much a work in progress in that regard. I am hoping to have it in an ebook form very soon, and get it onto Amazon.
Yep.
And look, you know, I certainly would love a publisher to pick it up. What can I say? But I think if you don't have an agent, and I think if you don't have form,
yeah,
it's not easy. It's not an easy game to get a foot in the door.
A lot of people think, oh, I'll just get an agent, or I'll just get published, and then I'll make millions of dollars and be happy for the rest of my life. Not the case. The happiness comes from the writing to start with.
True.
Comes from the creation, but also by having a really good author platform, by having a big email list, by having a good backlog of books. These are the things that make it easier for you to then get this
Promote
agent
yourself,
and publisher, as well as promoting yourself. Yeah, so it's so much more of a process, and it takes so much more time than people realize.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And there's no space for fear of promoting yourself a lot of the time either. You've just got to be able to put it in places where people are going to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, as I said, it's hard when you don't have a lot of time. I suppose I've used Instagram to a point. I've actually chosen the promotion option in Instagram a couple of times. I should do it again soon. And then look, I actually think, as advertising goes, you bang for your buck on Instagram isn't bad, because you don't have to spend a lot of money to actually reach quite a lot of people.
And there's not the issue of a block of text getting in the way. It's just an image.
Just a quick grab, and it's sort of, hopefully someone will sort of click on it and perhaps go to the website and
I've also heard that Pinterest gets a lot back. So if you're into visuals, you can probably replicate your your Instagram ad onto Pinterest with a little bit of a few changes.
Maybe so, yeah.
Yeah.
To look into it.
It's fascinating stuff. And a lot of people, again, advertisers often think, oh yeah, marketing is marketing, we'll just put it everywhere and anywhere, and we'll get stuff back because it's so easy.
No.
But people don't realize there's that barrier of the readers and the listeners not wanting to invest their time. They don't want to risk their time for something they don't think or don't know that they'll like.
Yeah, the word of mouth is good, I think. I have actually got several nice reviews, and I won't lie and say that there are people I know who've written them, but they also they're not liars, if you know what I mean. They've written them because they wanted to and they believed it.
Yeah.
And obviously I've had a number of, I think, genuine reviews and star ratings that weren't people like me, which is sort of satisfying as well.
That's good, very good.
But yeah, so I'm looking forward to having another go. I've actually got a prologue written.
Ooh, exciting.
It's so fun. Who Killed Chloe started with a prologue. I'll have to be honest and say it didn't start with a plot outline. It started with a prologue, and then it was, okay, so how did she get there?
Oh,
what happened? Yeah.
That's very good.
So then I had to sort of work back from there. And even as I wrote it, there were odd moments of sort of, okay, I think this needs to happen. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So what will you be speaking about at the Logan Writers' Festival?
Well, that's a challenging concept. And I know you talked about coming up with a bit of a PowerPoint. And at first I kind of thought, oh, what did I put on it? And then I thought, you know, I did research. I mean, I know Logan to a point, but I also did conduct a certain amount of research on settings and places that feature in the text. So I thought, I can sort of refer to the websites that I looked at. My son from a Lifeline Book Fest brought me back a big forensics hardcover that I used quite a bit.
That's a good son.
A few. Yeah, there were some interesting details to look at in there. How does the fluorescent light work? What do you actually call it? And I'd like to think that it's come across in a convincing way for readers.
Excellent.
And I've got a sense of that from what people have said who've read it. I have got a sense that they were there, they were engaged. Yeah. But characters was a huge part of it as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the characters, that's what grabs people.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, the people will come because they hear the plot is good, but then they stay and they fall in love with the characters.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And my characters do develop, and my characters, I think they are relatable.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having a cup of tea and
pleasure.
chatting
Thanks for
with
coming
me
to my
today.
deck.
This is you know what? I thank you for having this deck because this is gorgeous.
It isn't a bad spot.
Oh, the air smells so clean.
My preferred writing
middle.
spot. Yeah.
Right in the middle of Brisbane. Can't believe it.
We're just next to a busy road, but we don't hear much.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Well, you'll be able to see Sue give her talk on the 10th and the 11th of September at the Logan Writers Festival. So come down and make sure you pick up one of her cards so that you can listen to her audiobook as well.
Who killed Chloe? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alrighty.